She only kept repeating, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Now, this is Jennifer's testimony to the grand jury, and at no point, 12 separate times, did she ever say to the grand jury that she heard Karen say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. She only kept telling the grand jury that she heard Karen say, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? So that was some more misalignment with her testimony. Mr. Jackson asked her, like, don't you think that would be like a pretty important statement to be telling the grand jury or telling anybody at this point? I'm pretty sure is objected to, but I just find like, yes, you were able to tell everybody how she's, tell the grand jury that she said, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Several different times, but at no point in that did she ever say, I heard Karen say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him 3 times in a row. So that's a little suspect. If you remember back to like trial day, like 1 through 6, there was questioning of the EMTs that were at the scene. And one of the EMTs was a female, is or was friends and did go to school with this Nicole and Brian Albert's daughter. That is brought up specifically here when Jennifer was there at the scene with Karen, that she stated in front of that female EMT, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? And you reference back to that EMT's testimony. She said she remembers hearing Karen say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And it was again the 1, 2, 3 in a row. But as we're looking at this information from her testimony from the grand jury, she never tells the grand jury that she heard Karen say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. It was just 12 different separate times that she reports that she heard Karen say, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? You interpret that as you want. So let's get back to the timeline here. So she called 911 at 6:04 a.m. And then she called her sister, Nicole Albert, at 6:07 a.m. And then called Nicole again at 6:08 a.m. Then called Brian Albert at 6:23 a.m. All of which she said that these phone calls were never answered. However, we have the phone records saying that they were answered, but who knows if they were or not? Who knows with technology? Now, Mr. Jackson said, you deleted the call record from your phone to your sister, and she said, not by me. Now, why that wasn't followed up with, well, then by who? I don't know. Again, like I said, I don't feel like Mr. Jackson was really paying much attention to her responses a whole lot, or not really computing them too well. I wish we would have found out what she meant by not by me. We also find out that Jennifer knows or knew Mike Lank, the officer, as well as Sean Good, another officer. Her and the others were allowed to be in the house at the same time and to sit there and talk about what had happened while the police officer was present. Mr. Jackson, indicated at this point that it's more of them getting their story straight. She says, no, that's not the reason. We were just all sitting there talking about what had happened. But this is a problem because, again, we have it where witnesses weren't separated and questioned separately. They were all within the room or within ear distance of each other, talking to each other. And as she said, yes, they did talk about it. So going back to Trooper Proctor's report, in his report, he has it stated, quote, I saw a crack in it, end quote. And this was in reference to what Jennifer told him. But she said here on the stand, quote, the tail light was cracked, end quote. This was another instance where Trooper Proctor's report didn't match what Jennifer is claiming she told Trooper Proctor. Mr. Jackson did point this out, that here is another instance where Mr. Proctor didn't write accurately what you said. But the way he's asking it is like, really? So you're wanting to say Trooper Proctor's line. And he has his reasoning for why he's asking it that way. We also find out that Jennifer, she told Brian Albert that Trooper Proctor was going to be interviewing her. And she said that yes, Brian Albert did go to her house before the interview and said that Brian was in her bedroom during the time the Trooper Proctor was interviewing her. Why he was in the bedroom out of like all rooms, I don't know, or why he didn't just leave, wait outside. If he was really even in the bedroom or if he was sitting right next to her, I don't know. But this does contradict Brian Albert's statement of saying he had went to Jennifer McCabe's house because that's his sister-in-law and he's known her for a long time. And specifically, I didn't want this to be too much for her to handle. That was Brian Albert's reasoning for going to her house. However, Jennifer McCabe's saying she told Brian Albert that she was going to be interviewed by Trooper Proctor. And so Brian Albert went over there. She didn't express at this time, like, I was overwhelmed, I really needed his support. It was nothing like that. Her husband, Matt, was also there during this time. As a side note here, part of, I think, the fight, the argument or it was just like the chaos with this testimony of Mr. Jackson questioning her, was because when she answers a question, she like narrates like the whole thing. She doesn't just say like yes or no, like, were you here this day? It's like, yes, because I went to this and then was here. And it was like a constant explanation for every single thing she said based off of what was asked of her. And I think that helped her, but it also hurt her, because then she was providing more information than she should have given. But also she was providing more information, which also kind of proves her statements or her story. So you could look at it both ways. However, Mr. Jackson was getting upset that she continued to talk. So she does tend to like narrate a lot. But as she said herself, she is a chatty person. We have John's phone records being compared to Jennifer's phone records, and there's calls that don't match each other, or shall I say there's call logs or calls that are missing within Jennifer's phone extraction records that don't match John's phone extraction records. I'll get into more detail on those in a while. And Mr. Jackson also told her, you deleted calls before you handed your phone over to get it extracted. And she said, yes, she did, but she asked first if she could delete conversations between her and her daughters, and they said she could do that. So on February 1st, so at some point there was this group chat that was created, and on February 1st, Julie Albert texted the group and said Channel 4 is in DE, whatever that means. And so then apparently Matt replied in this group message or group chat, tell them the guy never went into the house. Brian Albert responded in the chat and said, quote unquote, exactly. So Mr. Jackson went on asking her questions because, after she was in Albert's house that morning, she said once they took John off in the ambulance, Carrie Roberts and Karen left. Jennifer said she went through the process of finding out Carrie's number because she didn't have Carrie's number, because she wanted to call her to ask if she was okay or if John was okay, like any updates on what had just happened now that they had left. And Mr. Jackson was insisting that Jen was trying to contact Carrie Roberts before the end of the day. And he kept going on with this before the end of the day. Like, you were trying to get a hold of Carrie Roberts before the end of the day. And Jennifer was saying, I was trying to get a hold of her that morning right away, like after she left, because I wanted to check, because they had just left. But Mr. Jackson was insisting, you were trying to get a hold of Carrie Roberts before the end of the day. And honestly, to me, listening to Jennifer's response seems plausible. So I'm not quite sure what Mr. Jackson knows that we don't know. But he kept insisting that, and Jennifer kept insisting no, is because she just left and I was trying to find out information about if they were okay or what was going on with John. And another reason why Mr. Jackson was really pushing about why she was trying to get Carrie Roberts' number was because apparently she had some of John's family's phone numbers and could have just called them directly to ask about how John was. And she said no, the reason why she didn't call any of the family members was because she had just went through that whole thing with Carrie, and she wasn't going to call like John's parents and like ask him all these questions. Her response seemed plausible. She was asked if she took any steps whatsoever to influence Carrie Roberts' timeline, and she said no, she didn't. Apparently Carrie came over to her house, and during this time is when it's being referenced or suggested that Jennifer was influencing Carrie's timeline, and because Jennifer's texting the group and saying Carrie is here going over the timeline. This was February 1st, and at this time, Carrie Roberts was interviewed on the phone by the police. And at this time, while she was being interviewed, Jennifer McCabe went to the group chat and reported to everybody, quote, she's telling him everything, and end quote, and she put that in all caps. And then the next text was, quote, all the stuff, end quote. And she explains that it's because she's blunt, shares all the information. So that's what she was referring to of hers, saying she's telling him everything. So that's her explanation. It sounds pretty plausible. However, the problem with that is she had already stated how she was over there going over the timeline, and then she's also being interviewed by the police at Jennifer's house. So there's many problems with that. Jennifer goes on to text in the group chat, quote, cops are here again, end quote. And then Nicole's response in the group chat was, quote, call us after. Jennifer tends to want to explain everything, and I think it helps her and also hurts her. And this specific time, one of her run-ons, she said that her, Matt, her husband, Nicole, and Brian Albert all did talk about what was happening because they were all trying to figure out what had happened to John. So I would agree that yes, naturally you are going to talk to all the people involved, trying to figure out like what happened. However, this will be used against you in a court of law because as we're having here, defense is going to say you had time to match your stories or get your stories straight. Even though that may not have been your intention, I can see how the conclusion could be drawn from that, and with good reason. And also part of her continuing to talk, she said they were trying to keep things secret and quiet. They just weren't going to communicate some things over text. So these are what she's saying. And of course, Mr. Jackson was going to use exactly what she said against her. And so Mr. Jackson was saying like, so you knew some of the information you guys were talking about, you weren't going to share over text message. And Jennifer was saying like, yes, because we didn't want some of this information to leave our little group. And Mr. Jackson, of course, said, so you yourself are saying you had information that you guys shared with each other that you didn't want leaving, quote unquote, your little group. And she says, yes. So, and in response to her saying this about like, we'll communicate about this later, or whatever, because I don't want some of this information to leave our little group. When she's, telling the group this information, Nicole Albert texts back, quote, we'll get more info tomorrow. I don't want to text about it, end quote. This was on January 29th. Okay, so then we have Carrie going over to Jennifer's house to go over the timeline. And then we find out that Jennifer is in the vehicle with Carrie Roberts, and they go to Officer Lank's house, as Jennifer says, because Carrie Roberts' daughter is friends with Officer Michael Lank's daughter. And so they went over there to drop the daughter off, and the daughter got out of the vehicle and went inside. Carrie and her talked with Miss Lank for an hour in the driveway in the snow. And if you remember, Officer Lank is one of the ones investigating all of this. You find out that this conversation apparently was never reported until defense discovered this meeting, this hour conversation. Jennifer never shared with anybody because she forgot about it. Now, what's interesting about this is this meetup, or if that's what you want to call it, this conversation with Mr. Lank's wife, Miss Lank, took place January 30th. And if you remember, the day before in these group chats, Nicole Albert said, we'll get more info tomorrow. I don't want to talk about it here. Jennifer was questioned, like, was this in reference to Nicole's text message to the group? Were you guys getting information? Did you stop by the Alberts' home? Like, you stopped by the Alberts' home on the way there. Jennifer said, no, you have to pass the Alberts' home in order to get to the Lank's house. But I do find that quite interesting that Jennifer is now driving around with Carrie, specifically dropping her daughter off at the Lank's home the day after we see this message from Nicole Albert saying we'll talk about this tomorrow, when Jennifer didn't even have Carrie's number. And so now she has her over at her house going over the timeline, and now the next day she's riding around with Carrie, dropping the daughter off or doing whatever they were doing. It all sounds pretty suspicious to me. As I said, I would get to the call logs, so let's take a look at John's phone records from the extraction done on his phone. So we have at 12:14, there was a call from Jen to John, and it was answered. And then there was a call at 12:18 from John to Jen, and she answered. And then there was a call at 12:29. And then there was a call at 12:29 from Jen to John, and it was not answered. Again at 12:41, Jen to John, not answered. 12:41 and 54 seconds. Jen to John, not answered. 12:43, these are all AMs. 12:43, Jen to John, not answered. 12:46, Jen to John, not answered. 12:47, Jen to John, not answered. 12:50, Jen to John, not answered. Jennifer says that the reason why these phone calls were made was because, as she stated, they were butt dials. Mr. Jackson took up with that answer and questioned about when you butt dial, you have to, it has to make the call, and then what happens, she says, well, if it will go to voicemail, and then it's like, well, how do you hang up from that? It's like, well, you have to hang up the phone in order to end the voicemail. Or this is Mr. Jackson saying, so for you to say like these are all butt dials, but it was continuously, like you had to have interacted with your phone at least 14 times from the butt dial to the hang up, from the butt dial to hang up, and he said, no, that wasn't the case. They were butt dials. Interesting information I also found came out of that was that in comparison to Jennifer's phone extraction records, Jennifer's phone records did not have these phone calls in her record. And Mr. Jackson told Jennifer, compared to your phone records, according to this report that they're, talking about in court, all of those calls from 12:29 to 12:50, all of those calls were deleted from your phone. The phone records of hers and John's, she did agree with Mr. Jackson that all the calls from 12:29 to 12:50 were not on her extraction report. Remember just earlier I was saying how she was asked, did you delete these, or phone calls were deleted from your phone, and she responded with, not by me. And do you remember me? So I was just saying how he didn't follow up and ask like, then by who? So I think this is where it gets tied in, was because he was going to bring up this call log, and it was going to prove that these messages or these calls were deleted. Again, we also don't find out specifically who deleted them, so but maybe we still will, because another day of trial is over, and they still weren't done with Miss McCabe, so she will be back on the stand tomorrow for trial day 16. So I'd love to hear your comments about what you think about all of this. I will talk to you guys trial day 16. Have a good night.